So you want to write a book, do you? Well, if you're serious about wanting to write a book, then you've come to the right place. I'm Professor Parsons, and I've been a writing teacher and a writer for over 30 years. And it's my mission to help you to understand some of the myths and the realities of the worlds of writing and publishing. This is episode number 8 in my series of videos to accompany my book, Permission to Write. In the last episode, we talked about the realities and some of the myths of the world of traditional publishing, which is where I got my start over 30 years ago. In this episode, I'm going to focus on the wild, wild world of self-publishing. We're going to talk about some of the myths and a lot of the realities. So if you're ready to carry on with this journey, come inside my computer with me and we'll get started. I've always cared about books. They've always played an important role in my life. First as a child who loved to read, then later as a teenager whose part-time job was as an assistant in a children's library. I really loved those Saturday morning story circles, and I loved helping the kids and their parents to find the right book. I learned a lot about children's literature that year. And then later, just like every other university student, books were my lifeline through undergrad and grad school. Then I started writing books. Then I started selecting and using books as student texts when I was a university professor for all those years. Then I wrote a few more books. What has struck me throughout the years is that there's an enormous variation in the quality of the books published. And these were all books produced by traditional publishers, like the ones we talked about in the last video. These days, with the advent of the internet, everyone can be a publisher, and there's more variation in the quality of the books out there than ever before. Which kind of leaves the readers with the following dilemma. How could they know that the book they're selecting is a quality book, especially if the author has chosen to publish it herself without the benefit of a third-party endorsement that kind of comes as the part of the package of the traditional publishing model? The truth is that it's almost impossible, but you don't have to be one of those authors contributing to the downfall of the quality of books out there. If you're a careful self-publisher, you can produce a quality book, if you're willing to learn a whole new set of skills and do the hard work. Now, since I care so much about quality writing and I care about the quality of books, I also care about the publishing world and how it's evolving and the fact that amateur publishing can be a problem. Before you hit publish on that self-publishing platform you probably don't know enough about, you owe it to yourself to pay attention. What do you really know about self-publishing? Probably nothing. Or at least probably nothing much that reflects the reality of the self-publishing world. Until you've done it at least once, you don't have any real idea about the realities. Let's take a bit of a walk down memory lane first through the history of this self-publishing thing. You're probably familiar with the term vanity publishing, and you probably think that it's sleazy, sordid, dodgy, and just a bit shady. You probably think you'd never publish through a vanity publisher. Well, just a few short decades ago, vanity publishing was the only alternative an author had to slogging through the world of traditional publishers. And by any definition, vanity publishing was and is self-publishing. Now, before you start arguing that they are very different from one another because you read about that somewhere, just be quiet and listen. The term vanity publishing came into existence around 1960 or so. And at the time, vanity presses were viewed as little better than fraudsters. They took an author's money and they sent them a box of hard-covered books. Now, that's hardly fraudulent, since that's what they contracted with them to do. Some of these presses did some editing, most did not. They did no marketing. And trust me, I know about this from personal experience. So what's the difference between vanity publishing and self-publishing? Well, it's a myth that there is any difference. If you understand that self-publishing in its most general sense means nothing more than a publishing model where the author pays all the publishing expenses, then the reality is that there is absolutely no difference. Many self-publishing gurus will tell you that they are different. They are not. It is a myth. There's a whole online cottage industry involved in helping you to spot a vanity press and how to avoid it. What they're really trying to do is help you to avoid self-publishers that are this sort of fraudulent. But the truth is that when an author pays, an author pays. You just have to know what you're paying for. And make no mistake, Despite what you might have read online, most self-publishing platforms have little interest in whether or not you sell books. They make their money selling you services. In this way, they are in fact vanity presses. I'll talk briefly about the business models in a few minutes. There are different models for self-publishing, and I'm going to discuss 3, although there are permutations and combinations of these, making approaches many and varied. But it all comes down to how much of the work you do yourself and how much you pay. Let's talk about approach number 1. Do it all by yourself, pay only in terms of the time it takes, add nothing of value to your product. You can publish for nothing. Self-published thriller writer Laurie Lesko summarizes this well. The good news about self-publishing is that you get to do everything yourself. The bad news about self-publishing is you get to do everything yourself. This is the easiest one to accomplish, and perhaps the hardest. All you do is go online and find a self-publishing platform. Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP platform, is the biggest. Draft to Digital is another biggie. Upload your manuscript, regardless of how great or shitty it is, and press publish. And you could even use their handy-dandy cover generator. Easy? Maybe. But as one self-published author, Nan McCarthy, says, anyone who says it's easy to self-publish a book is either lying or doing a shitty job. Do you want to do a shitty job? Approach number 2, do it mostly by yourself. Subcontract and pay for services like editing and cover design. Add some value to your product. In this case, you can decide to use the same platform as when you do it all yourself. But you can hire editors and designers, either those offered by the platform or ones that you find yourself. This is where you begin to pay in terms of money, and you can spend a little or you can spend a lot. You can buy quality services or not. You can hire a cover designer for $200 or more, or hire one on Fiverr and pay, well, $5 or $10. Self-published paranormal romance author Zoe Winters provides us with some insight here. Whatever you may have heard, self-publishing is not a shortcut to anything, except maybe insanity. Self-publishing, like every other kind of publishing, is hard work. You don't wake up one morning good at it. You have to work for that. And finally, approach number 3, do none of the publishing by yourself. Buy a package that includes editing, internal and cover design, and publishing services. Pay for the services up front and add some value to your product. This approach involves going to a publishing service provider like iUniverse or Friesen Press, selecting a package of services and paying for them. And by the way, most of these companies also let you publish using approach number 2, a la carte services. They actually call that assisted self-publishing. Now, how much do these services cost? I'm sure you're dying to know. Well, for example, at this time, Friesen Press, which is a Canadian company, charges $1,999 for their lowest priced package that includes a manuscript evaluation of up to 60,000 word manuscript. Now, presumably beyond that, as any reasonable novel would be, you pay more. ISBNs, not really a bargain since Canadians don't have to pay for these anyway. Cover design, interior layout, a book marketing webinar so that you can then do it yourself, and distribution, which you could also do by yourself for nothing. You'd have to move up to their $5,000 package to have copy editing included, and as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the most important pieces in publishing a book. For another example, the American behemoth iUniverse is similar. Their basic package comes in at $999 US, and I know from personal experience that they will never let you go. They will continue to try to sell you services. I had the unfortunate experience of going this route with one of my first novels, Grace Note. Never again. They even designed the cover. I refused to take responsibility for this one. So how then do self-publishing companies actually make money? Well, author and executive director of CNET, David Carnoy, has some special insight into the differences between traditional and self-publishing companies. He says traditional publishers aim to publish hundreds of thousands of copies of a few books. Self-publishing companies make money by publishing 100 copies of hundreds of thousands of books. Most of their business models are based on selling services to authors. Remember the examples of iUniverse and Friesen Press I just mentioned? They really have very little interest in how many copies your book could sell. I think it's safe to say that they figure any sales are just gravy. Their interest lies in selling you services. Some you need, many you don't. So let's talk about that. What services do you actually need? Editing? Definitely. Cover design? Usually. Layout? Probably. Marketing support? Maybe. Script treatment for turning your book into a film? Not at all. Now, before we finish up this episode, I want to take a moment to discuss why you might choose to self-publish. Writing guru Joanna Penn suggests that there are several advantages to self-publishing that you might consider important, and I agree with her for these couple. First, you have complete creative control over your finished product. This is almost completely correct, but some of the large self-publishers will maintain some control, as noted in my own experience with iUniverse. Your work will get to market faster, no doubt about it. This is entirely correct. I've signed book contracts where I didn't see the finished product for 18 months to 2 years, and that's about average. Your royalties will be higher. This is true, but temper that with the words of wisdom from self-published author Amanda Hawking. Some books and authors are bestsellers, but most aren't. It may be easier to self-publish than it is to traditionally publish, but in all honesty, it's harder to be a bestseller self-publishing than it is with a house. Now, Joanna Penn also suggests that publishing your work yourself is empowering. I can't argue with that. There's a lot more to self-publishing a book, and you can read about that in Permission to Write, How to Write a Book, and Other Myths from the Real World of Writing and Publishing, where I take you through the good, the bad, and the truly hideous aspects of self-publishing. You could also stay on this video journey with me. Well, now that we've talked about traditional publishing in the last video, self-publishing in this one, let's say that you have published your book. In the next video, I want to talk about the myths and realities in the world of book promotion and why you're not likely to be a best-selling writer anytime soon. Unless, of course, you are. So stay with me on this journey. Subscribe to the Moonlight Press channel and we'll carry on. See you next time.